Andrea Waddell here. Welcome to the studio. In today's video, I'm going to talk to you about a very common challenge for artists, and that is creating a cohesive body of work, working in a series, and doing that in a way that doesn't stifle your creative impulses. This is a very common challenge for artists. And it is also a sign of maturity as an artist when you have tried all kinds of different things and then you get to a place where you want to start showing your work or reaching out to galleries, um, getting into shows. All of that stuff means you need to be able to have, you know, a series of things that are recognizable and in the same signature style. So I'm going to talk to you about the way that I approach that and steps that I take. Before I do that, I want to thank you, each of you. There are now 10,000 subscribers to this channel, and I'm really grateful for that. And I'm grateful that you guys are here and getting value from this content. And finally, I have some exciting classes coming up in October, self-paced classes, a live class over Zoom, and some pre-recorded classes. I do this regularly. So all of that information is in the notes below. So without further ado, let's jump in. So the first easiest approach is to work small if you're working in a series. So you can lay out all your paintings, these small formats here. You can see these are pretty small. And then you work on them all at the same time or in the same painting session, so that you have basically have the same idea and theme running through them. And you're also working with the same medium and same size, same format. These were oil and cold wax and a little bit of pastel. These were sort of these abstractions of a landscape. Same thing happens here. They were small. This was a series around the illuminated manuscript, this idea that I had with some gold leaf and this beautiful blue. So that's the first approach, is work small and do them all at the same time. In that same vein, you can also sketch these things out. Like you can create these thumbnail sketches and come up with similar color palettes, similar ideas, and just let that run all the way through and just see if there's some things that come out through the sketching process that you want to reference in a series of paintings. I know a lot of people are resistant to working in sketchbooks because you want to get straight to the real meat and create a product, so to speak, but it's a really good practice just to sit down and bang out a bunch of these little thumbnail sketches as a way to play with a color palette, play with some shapes and some ideas. That's another way to do it before you go to just even the sort of these smaller sized pieces. That's a good starting point. But then that doesn't help us with the question of what about when you work big? Because working on two things at the same time, I don't know about you, I can't really do that very well. I work on one big painting at the same time. So it becomes a question of, I'm gonna talk to you about how I do that, how I learn from past pieces and keep the same theme going. Because the sign of immaturity as an artist is when you start to see all kinds of random styles, like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. It's fine for your own experimentation, but that's maybe not necessarily something you want to put on your website. I am very guilty of that. I have a creative mind and I always want to try new stuff and, get sidetracked. So it's important when you are starting to create a series of large work, and by large work, I'm talking about 36 by 36, 48 by 48, etc., is to stay focused and articulate what your intention is and to learn from each piece as that piece carries you to the next one. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about here. So I filmed my process painting this piece that is right here. This is a 48 by 48. done with RNF pigment sticks and raw pigment. I'm going to talk to you about supplies in a second. But I made this video because I bumped up into exactly this issue of creating coherency. As I was creating this piece, I went off in a different direction. So I'm going to tell you how I reined myself back in, and hopefully that's going to be helpful to you. I'll take you on a little studio tour. So I'm working on a series that looks like the one behind me. And when I was working on the blue one I just showed you, I forgot. I got sidetracked. I chased a new idea because that's part of the creative process, and I forgot that I was going off in the wrong direction. So what I do is I have the work of the series behind or somewhere close to me so that I can look at it. And then I look really closely at it and I start to analyze and write down the things about it that I want to make sure I retain and bring into the new painting. I'm going to show you what I mean, get a little closer and show you what I mean here. So the first thing I do is think about what medium I used and the size, and also the state of mind that I was in and the process that I followed. So I liked this one. I really liked a couple of things about it. And so I start to, when I'm looking at it, and this is what I would encourage you to do, is write it down, articulate it, be very specific. So for me, I thought this had a little bit of poetry. I don't know why, but I thought this almost looked like a little bit of a circus type thing, which is why I called this the juggling act. And I'm going to remember that. Okay, poetic, little pops of color in a primarily three-color palette with little bits of saturated color that pop out in these kind of two areas at the top and at the bottom. I also really liked in this one the way this paint was manipulated. These were just with brushes, really. And I also like about this one that I want to remember is I got these really interesting hard lines. They're not very dominant. They're very soft and they're very slightly suggested, but I like the subtlety of it. And I also like that weird little shape of that little bird. And I like this sort of line work here. So I retain that. Poetic, soft, medium, size of my surface, color choices, and the state that I was in, which is so important. And the state that I was in is I was enjoying myself. I was enjoying the freedom of just letting loose, going back and forth with that letting loose process and stopping a lot and looking at the work. So that's what I retained from this one. I'll show you another one. This is another one in the same series. So this one is a 40 by 40. And when I look at it, I do the same thing. What was the medium? What was the size? What state was I in? And what are some of the effects in this that I want to see, perhaps, if I can, in the next one? And so the way I can articulate this is that it is RNF pigment sticks, and I use those to get these really interesting marks, and I let myself be very free when I was creating that. Same here. That's why I like RNF pigment sticks. You can kind of, you can really work them wet on wet. And I like the line work in that corner up there. And the other part about this that I really liked was the luminosity, because there aren't that many layers. I worked some transparent layers over essentially almost white canvas, and I got some beautiful transparency with that one. So I'm going to remember those things: line work, RNF pigment sticks, size, the way that I got that luminosity. I'm going to try to remember that to bring that into the next one. And finally, there is this piece, 36 by 36. I asked myself the same question: what was the medium? So this is done on board. It's one of these cradled panels. It was old, an old painting. And so because it was old, I used oil and cold wax just because I could get thick paint on top of it. So the difference between this one and the last one was on canvas. This one was on board. and what I like about it. First of all, what I liked is the experience of working on canvas. So I'm going to bring that to the next work. I preferred working on canvas and I preferred the effects I got, but I'm going to retain that. So I'm not going to do all boards. I will do canvas. But what I liked about this one was the same kind of thing, is that it's an interesting purple to me anyway. And it has just little elements. Again, I did that with the R&F pigment stick, of loose drawings and trying to reference little things. Like everyone's seen this little crown thing. It came out of nowhere. I just let that be like loose scribbles and, played around here with some glitter, created a little chalice-like thing. And so I will retain from this one sort of another idea that very few colors, that there is like a vignette style composition where I have just little bits and elements poking through, not too many, and that it guides the eye. So I'm going to take those things into the next painting that I started working on, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. So then it came time to work on this painting. But meanwhile, this is how the creative mind goes. I was looking at these other ones and I was seeing little things that started to look like they were referencing bits and pieces of something. And I started to see like tarot-like imagery, little crowns, little circus-like things. And suddenly I got really pulled into that idea. And so I started doing, a whole different thing of turning this little painting into a tarot-like painting, a tarot card. I've already done this before years ago. And then I got so excited about that started to become, that was the underpainting of this one. But this is why this is a good skill. I saw what I was doing. I recognized the thing, and I stopped myself and I went around the studio and I looked at the work that this one needs to go in that path, articulated the things about what I was seeing that I liked, and then made sure I stayed focused and creative enough to do something in a similar vein, not as soft, because I wanted more punchy colors, because this is the time of year where I want brighter colors, but it was the same idea of keeping it to just a few colors and maybe some referencing just a few things, doing it semi-realistically, but keeping it, you can tell that it's the same artist. So you will see that process, how I came to this painting in the footage that I filmed of myself doing that. First, let's talk supplies. So the supplies that I used in a lot of these, and especially this one back here, were R&F pigment sticks and pure pigment. So a couple of things. So R&F pigment sticks, the reason that I love them despite their expense is I don't have to put them on palette paper. I don't have to mix it. I can just put them on here directly and mark make with them and smooth them out or cut up little bits of them and mix that up. They are made with linseed oil, natural wax, and pure pigment. So you get these really, it's basically high quality tube paint in a stick form. I really love them. So here's what I would suggest if you want to use R&F pigment stick is they are much more affordable when you get them in sets, and they have a set. This is the way I started with them. Well, no, actually that's not true. I started by buying the colors that I got excited about, a lot of pinks, a lot of blues, the usual thing, because these are wonderful to use both of those, the opaques and the transparents, and to keep those separate in little boxes or somewhere separate so that you can find them, because it's written in tiny little letters here, transparent, and you might not remember that, but that's a good idea. So you can get them in sets. I don't have any sets to hold up, but you can find these sets. And or you can get these little mini sticks like this. They're this little, they're this size, they're small, 19 milliliters. So you can get these little small guys. Other thing I can say about these is when they used to come in this tube form, and the tube is not meant to be a container to hold them in. You don't want to do that. You don't want to try to squash them back into this little plastic tube because you will lose your paint. Just put them, wrap them in wax paper. I just put them in little little boxes and put some wax paper over them, and they develop a little skin, but you can rub that off with some paper and then they're good to go. RNF has started to use these boxes now instead of the plastic tubes, and I think that you can actually store them in these boxes. This is the sort of the brand new thing. The other thing that I used in this painting behind me, the way I got these really beautiful blues, are these pigments, dry pigment. I get these in a place in the south of France, in Marseille. If you ever happen to be traveling and you want to find that, it's called Vaquier. And I'll put that in the notes below if you want that information. I don't know if they ship or not. I go there because I go there once a year to run a retreat. And I lived there for a long time, and it's just they're much less expensive, but you can find dry pigment anywhere. That's not exclusive to that place. It needs a binder. So when I'm working with oil paint, I tend to use either linseed oil. It'll take longer for it to dry. I don't want to use any of that stuff, liquid or any of that stuff with the smells. I can't hack it. I use Gamblin solvent-free fluid medium. Just a little bit of this, mix that in, and then you find the consistency that you like. Or I mix it with linseed oil, and if I'm working with cold wax medium, you can just mix that directly into the cold wax medium. So that's essentially the supplies. I'm also, in this painting demonstration, you'll see, sometimes I just put the RNF pigment down, just draw, and then just move it around with a dry brush so that I can get effects of interesting paint application quality that changes from as you move your eye around the painting. So I hope you get something from watching this. And one more pointer before I just move into the actual footage. So when I came back and I saw this painting and I saw that it was going off in a little tarot direction, and I knew I had to come back and stop that impulse or do it on some other, on one small painting and leave that for another time or another idea. I saw what was happening with this one, and I really recommend just sketching out just some ideas. So I went around the studio, I looked at the things that I liked. I had wanted to reference a few things that were kind of still in my mind from this trip to France, and they were these arches, and just created just little bits and pieces, thought about what is one part of the underpainting that I wanted to keep, and it's this little vase, and divided the space, and just give yourself an idea in a little sketchbook. Do multiple sketches. It will really, really help you with the kind of the composition design before you jump in, so that you can be really free and be really spontaneous. So that's my process for working in a series. I've mixed up some paint using these beautiful pigments that I brought back from France. You can get those here, the place that I go in France. These are just a lot cheaper. Anyway, if you're using pigments, be sure to wear a mask and close the tops. I'm adding some Gamsol to thin this out because I want to work with my brush and create some movement with my gestures, and the paint's too thick because I've also used RNF pigment stick, the white of the RNF pigment stick, and it's too thick. I can't move things around, so I'm going to thin it out with some Gamsol. So kind of one of the things that's important here is to move your brush around so that the gestures look alive, and those alive gestures give the painting energy, interest, and rhythm. So I'm going to fill up this whole space here with this beautiful blue and then take it from there. So here's where I've gotten to so far. This has turned into a completely different thing, and I kind of like where it's going. I've got these arches. I have created harmony by making sure that the background color is pretty much more or less the same. I have to still work on this little purple side over here. And then there's too much going on here. So I'm probably going to maybe add a little bit of gray in here once this is dried into this area here, so that it's not one great big column or block. And what I have learned as a painter over time is that less is more. Simple is good. The tendency is to want to keep adding and trying and, you know, little bits and pieces here and there. And I might add a few more things, but what I'll do is I won't change the color palette. And what it would be, if I'm going to add anything more, it's just going to be small things, kind of like this little detail here. And then I added this line here. And then I think I'll just let this one rest for a while. I like it a lot better than what it was before, and it is going in the direction of this one, but I've been able to be creative enough to keep my own interest going, which is really important as I work through this one. Thanks for watching.